I hope you'll go along with this rather unusual setting and the fact that I remain seated when I get introduced, and the fact that I'm going to come to you mostly through this medium here for the rest of the show. And I should tell you that I'm backed up by quite a staff of people between here and Menlo Park, where Stanford Research is located, some 30 miles south of here. And if every one of us does our job well, it'll all go very interesting, I think. We're pursuing this monstrous goal. Monstrously difficult. This monstrous goal. Monstrously difficult.
So, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. I am joined tonight by Daniel Silveira, and he is the producer and director of the Augmentation of Douglas Engelbart, which is an upcoming documentary about Douglas Engelbart, who was I'm going to let you do most of the talking about him, but he's a very influential, very important figure in the history of personal computing, especially so in what you call modern personal computing, which is what we all use these days, whether on your modern graphical user interface computer or, frankly, your graphical computer. I don't have mine handy, smartphone, because it's really an extension of that. Anyway, hey, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad we could do this, and I'm really excited about the documentary. Douglas Engelbart is not that well known at all, unfortunately, by most people. I guess your average Joe, they only know of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. Basically, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, they invented everything that has to do with personal computing, right?
Yeah, they got their cult followings and they're very popular. But you're correct. Mm-hmm. It's if you talk about, and in fact, it's interesting because it goes back further than the 80s, right? But they do talk about Bill Gates and Steve Jobs as the main guys.
Right. Well, like a lot of things, they sort of brought. So as you're going to talk about, we'll talk about. They brought a lot of Douglas Engelbart's pioneering work, basically to the masses. So that's where that fits in. So anyway, so tell us about Douglas Engelbart, about this film, and what. So how about my first question is, why did you decide to make this film?
Well, we really have to go back to how I came about the story of Doug, and it's interesting because it has to do with Steve Jobs, obviously. When Steve passed away, the historian Wannabe and me decided to research it. It was something that was interesting to me, and you start the research and you realize, wow, he's very, very smart. He did a lot of things. And in the back of my mind, I always remember the Macintosh mouse. Mm-hmm. And you continue to research and you continue to investigate, and you realize, oh, it didn't come from Apple. It came from Xerox PARC, right? So then you research a little further, because I remember watching Pirates of the Silicon Valley that everybody has seen, right? And there's that scene where the lady talks about, we invented the mouse.
Right.
And lo and behold, you go to Wikipedia and research, and no, it didn't come from Xerox PARC.
Right.
It came like 15 years before by this called Douglas Engelbart. And researching Douglas and finding out that, he invented a mouse, but he was so much more than that. It just absolutely blew me away, and that's where the idea of the documentary came from.
So, Daniel, tell me a little bit more then about some of the things that you found out about Douglas Engelbart, about the mouse, for instance, but maybe some of his other work that really spoke to you, that that inspired you, and ultimately to make this film.
I can tell you, David, that there were many people that I read about that had a major influence on how personal computers are today. But Doug, for me personally, had a view of the future that really nailed it on the head. Mm-hmm. He saw computers and how people would collaborate with each other in the 40s during the war. That was his vision. He had a vision of people working together in front of displays. And then he thought, well, the more people can work together, and augment their collective IQ, the better we can solve the world's problems. And so, as he eventually had the epiphany that computers would be the tool to do that. But even before that, in the 50s, I think it was late 50s, I would say 59, he wrote a paper and he gave a talk, and I think it's called get the name.
It's like the one pivotal paper he wrote?
No, this is before.
It's a different one, okay.
Microelectronics, I tell you right now. Similitude. Let's see here. Engelbart. Okay, it's Microelectronics and the Art of Similitude. And in this paper, in this talk that he gave, he talked about the shrinking of transistors. This is 6 years before Gordon Moore. So, and Gordon Moore has talked about how this particular thing influenced him. Right. And so this is just one of many things, that he envisioned and people don't know about. Eventually he put it together, and he put together an amazing team of engineers at SRI, and the rest is kind of history for the ones who know. But those things, in addition to the mouse, really stood out to me.
And so tell those who don't know what SRI is, or what it was.
Of course, SRI is Stanford Research Institute. At the time, it was Stanford Research International. That's what it is now, right? Yeah, that's what it is now.
I think so.
See, right now they're called SRI International. SRI is nothing.
Oh, okay. And back then it was Stanford Research Institute.
Correct. They were part of Stanford, and they were part of a group of many engineers who put together different projects. Some worked in artificial intelligence, and others worked in different labs. Doug was given a lab. He led a lab called ARC, Augmented Research Center. And within this lab, he put together a team of amazing people: Bill English, Bill Paxton, Jeff Rudolson, who was kind enough to help us with the documentary, and he was the go-to guy for everything, and he's in the documentary the majority of the time. But within this group, they put together many of the things we see today. And so, but that's what SRI is. It was part of Stanford at that time, and inside of SRI, they created a group called ARC, and that's what Doug was working on.
So the name of the documentary is The Augmentation of Douglas Engelbart. And so that word, augmentation, so that's a very important word. So you put it in the title, and obviously that was something that that word was kind of connected with his research back then, and frankly throughout his life. So maybe speak to that a little bit. So that had a lot to do with his vision, right?
Of course. I mean, he wrote his famous paper in 1962, right? And let me just find the exact year here, because I don't want to.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, I had 62 written down for. I know the one important paper he did. Yeah, and that had a lot to do with him, I guess, starting the research, right?
Right. So he did his thesis. I think it was his PhD in 1962. Man, I wish I had this information in front of me. Sorry.
That's okay.
My apology. I just want to make sure I have it right so it doesn't sound dumb. Okay, yeah, so 1962, you're correct. So augmenting human intellect, the conceptual framework, right? His idea essentially really isn't a lot about the computer itself, but it's about how to put everybody's mind together. So it's not artificial intelligence, but it's how can we all sync up and solve the problem, right? So he's given many examples. What if a person across the world is trying to build a bridge? He needs assistance. Well, if you put 20 engineers together, we could figure out pretty quickly how to do it. And so his idea was always that the world is becoming more complex, and in order to solve those problems, we need to get together and solve those problems. The computer was the tool for that. But not only the computer, this is where people get confused, right? The personal computer is just a part of it. It wasn't a personal computer. Right. It was a network of computers. It was everybody collaborating with each other. And that, as we'll talk more, David, that was one of his biggest arguments frustrations during the late 70s, early 80s, the personal computer revolution boom. He was very upset that those computers weren't connected.
Right.
So they were pointless to him. So.
Yeah, right. It sort of it took it a long time, the revolution, to catch up with his ideas. His ideas wasn't just everyone got all caught up with the mouse. That really wasn't the core of what he was trying to do, right? His was more the collaborative thing.
Right.
You know, in that demo, which you'll talk more about, a famous demo, he wasn't just showing this. The mouse was just a minor player in the whole thing. It was about what they were doing, collaborating.
That's correct, 100% correct. Even in the documentary, most people say that, and he himself, I think he didn't like the association with the mouse, because the mouse wasn't built for recognition. The mouse was just a tool that he put together. It just so happens that we use it until today. It's an amazing tool, but it was the fact that, hey, we're going to put this together to help mankind. That was the ultimate goal. So.
And actually, I mean, just in the last, we're doing a little bit of what he saw. This is 2018, so that was 50 years ago, right? The 50th anniversary of. I'm jumping ahead, I know, of the demo that you need to talk about, but so we're doing a little bit of what he showed the future would be, or he showed what could be done then, but not for normal people, I guess. But let's just go ahead and jump on that then. So. I have plenty of other questions to ask you, and I know you have more to say about Douglas Engelbart. But he's probably most well known for the mouse, and he's also most well known for this thing called the mother of all demos, which this happened in 1968, so 50 years ago. So maybe speak to that.
Well, 1968 was I would say 68 and 69 were the years that revolutionized the century, in my opinion. That's how drastic those 2 years were. So 68, Douglas Engelbart and his amazing team of engineers, Bill English, Jeff Rulison, and everybody else put together the mother of all demos. They demonstrated what the computer would become to be, but not only the computer, but what the internet would eventually become to be. They demonstrated hyperlinking, maps, conferencing, mouse, Windows, remote collaboration,
right?
Just like we're doing right now. And they demonstrated this using very, very crude equipment, and essentially what it is, a very, very crude basic GUI, nonetheless a GUI, because within it he could manipulate words. And so he would show a shopping list, and he would say, okay, now we can categorize these shopping lists, and we can put fruits here and other products here and other products here, and then we can subcategorize these, and then we can link these to a map. And he would link them to a map that the map was essentially a daily routine. So it would say, okay, I got to go to work, and then I have to go to the store. And what am I going to get at the store? So at the store, he would click on the store, and the list would come up. Then he could get out of the list, and he could go to the library. And in the library, he could say the books that were overdue. I mean, these things, they're actually quite new.
Yeah.
So it was displayed in 1968, as well as hyperlinking. And at the end of it all, they showed remote collaboration. So on the remote collaboration, we saw camera, just like we're seeing each other now, except, that was the only thing that was fake in the demo, right? They used real cameras and a real camera signal to display the cameras. Everything else was done by the computers at SLI modems. Jeff Rulison explained to us that, besides the cameras, everything else was done by the computer. So the computer did show.
Oh, because the video they were using like television production methods for split screen and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. But everything else, as far as hyperlinking, windowing, and collaboration, because for example, when they showed the remote collaboration, right, and Bill, I believe it was Bill and Jeff Rulison got on the camera, and they said, okay, we're going to see your mouse now, right? And so Doug's working on a document, and somebody jumps in with their mouse and starts working with it at the same time.
Yeah.
That's real computer work in 1968.
Yeah.
That wasn't fake. So, it blew me away. It blew everybody that was in the audience away. I interviewed Alan Kay that was there. I interviewed Vint Cerf. and these people were amazed by this presentation. And so that's why I say, 1968, Mother of all Demos, pivotal moment in the century.
Yeah, and so where Douglas Engelbart was this highly inspirational, influential person, doing this work, and his team, obviously, too, not just individual person. The other person you mentioned, Alan Kay, he was sort of that next generation, not really a whole generation, but in computer world, a whole generation maybe. He's that next guy who then he went on to be in Xerox PARC and sort of was the groundbreaking, foundational kind of person in that group. I mean, there are others, obviously, but yeah. And then,
what about Alan, David? Let me just chime in real quick. Sorry.
Sure, yeah.
Alan mentioned something really interesting, and that's going to be in the documentary. He said many of the NLSers, and they say NLSers because the system that Doug had was called the online system, or the NLS, right?
Right.
So they call it the NLSers. Many of the NLSers from Engelbart's team went to Xerox PARC, and that's how they a lot of those things. I mean, they brought them out, and they brought everything, all of those concepts, they brought them over to Xerox PARC.
Isn't that funny? Just like later, people left Xerox PARC to go to Apple and Microsoft.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's that transition every year, and I guess my goal and dream with the documentary is to show, hey, right before Gates and Jobs, and right before Alan Kay and Xerox PARC, there was a group of DARPA engineers at this little lab in SRI that did some pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah. Well, sometimes, so I'm going to make this statement that without Douglas Engelbart and SRI and the NLS and all those things that happened there, there wouldn't have been a Xerox PARC, and then there wouldn't have been an Apple. So obviously that's not completely true. Like with a lot of things that, potentially things would maybe have been discovered and invented and whatever. Maybe they'd be different or whatever. But yeah, the work there was so foundational and so important, and I don't want to get me talking too much or off talk about this, but I think the way I see it is what they did was amazing at the time, but what they had to do in the background, and even what Douglas Engelbart was doing there, was fairly complicated. So then what Xerox PARC did is they were able to make all that sort of stuff way easier. You know what I mean? And then what Apple and then later Microsoft did is they would make it even easier, but then make it economic and make it, mass consumption. So that's kind of the way that evolved, I think. So really, it almost, it hadn't been for Douglas Engelbart and so on. Anyway, yeah, it's very exciting. Let's see. What do you see then? This is maybe it's a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it. What do you think are the most important contributions then that he made?
Wow. There's so many things. There are so many things that he did that he dreamed about, and he didn't invent everything that they did. That goes to the team that he worked with, right? So again, Jeff, and other people that worked with him, those guys were pretty amazing, as well as Alan Kay was pretty adamant about making sure that the other DARPA groups got credit, and he's correct. They were 100% influential in everything that Doug was working too. Everybody was working in different things at that time. My take with Doug is he was able, in my opinion, to put all of this together and to literally, like I said, nail on the head how things were going to be. It didn't turn out exactly how he wanted. He had different views of in fact, when you mentioned things got easier, he didn't like that. he was more about, he was more about, if we're going to use something for 8-10 hours a day, eventually we'll get the hang of it. Kind of like a violin. Alan Kay would say a violin. It's harder, but the results are better. And so he would say things about, the mouse maybe should have had 10 buttons or something like crazy like that, right? Xerox PARC would not have any of that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the division between Doug and the other people, is that Doug wasn't there to commercialize a product. Doug was there to make a product to make the world better. I think, in my opinion, that's kind of where things changed and people left SRI and went to Xerox PARC. Hey, you got to make it at the end of the day. I understand why people would do that, but pinpoint one particular. It's not the mouse. The mouse is great, but it's everything that he was able to dream about, put together, and then he managed the team that eventually showed this amazing demo of everything that we have.
Yeah.
And, in the documentary, there's another gentleman I interviewed. His name is John Markoff, NY Times reporter who's covered Silicon Valley for many, many years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good friend of Doug's. And he said something that makes sense. Before any of the demos that we've seen today by Apple or by Microsoft or by Tesla or whoever, there was Douglas Engelbart. That was the first. That was the demo. He had the headset on, and that was the demo. And Vince Cerf said, you know what? He's right. That's the first one, and that's the first one that people ever stood up and clapped for.
Yeah, I think the mouse though was so amazing. That's why people just sort of like. Ultimately, they remembered that. That
was Steve Jobs' reaction, right? I mean, he said, "Why are we using this?"
Yeah, probably the mouse was the simplest thing to adapt. Yeah, that's why that thing took off and stuff too.
Sure,
but you're right. I think that film of that demo remained the most inspirational. I'm sure people at Xerox PARC would rewatch that. And then Apple, they watched it, and then even later through the years, because a lot of the stuff he showed, it only really came to be now. And you're right. They were SRI was part of the DARPANET, right? It was the early internet.
Correct.
Those ARPANET, DARPANET.
Right. They were funded by DARPA,
yeah.
and all those different groups were funded by that. And so, I mean, that leads us to next year, right? 1969, and that was the first connection to from UCLA to SRI.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
And that's the one that the connection dropped. I don't know if you know the story where they did a connection.
Mm-hmm.
So UCLA was the first node, and then SRI came in after that. And when they connected, they typed in the word login, right? But it dropped at the G, and so it just had low.
Oh yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
So that's that famous documentary that came out last year. Lo and behold, that's where they got that low.
Oh yeah.
So
there you go. That's another thing there. Well, I mean, another. Not only did he and his team innovate a lot of things that we think of now in modern personal computing on an individual basis. Yeah, the mouse and menus and different stuff. What you see is what you get and all that. But yeah, he was doing early. That demo also showed what you'd be able to do right with the internet later on. I know you said that.
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah.
Right at the end of the documentary, if you pay attention, right at the very end, he mentions, now we're working on a couple of more things that are exciting, and one of them is called the ARPANET, right?
Oh.
And it's so simple, but it's so important.
Yeah, right.
It's amazing. These nodes, which eventually became the backbone of what we have as the internet, the idea of the internet, and then you get people like Vince Cerf inventing TCP/IP, and the rest is history. So it all started there with those guys, in my opinion. So,
and that just tells you how far ahead they were, because think about how long it took for, everything to catch up with what we saw in that. So tell me a little bit about yourself and who else is working on this with you.
Sure.
How long have you been working on it and so on?
Well, like I said, the idea came about when Steve passed away.
Okay, so like late 2011.
Exactly, yeah. I would say 2011, 2012 is when I started researching, and I found out all that good stuff about the mouse. And so I thought, well, this has to be a documentary, because there's nothing. I mean, there's some videos. I saw the demo, I saw interviews, but nothing full length. And
no.
I did a lot of research, and approximately 2015, 2016, I started reaching out to people. And so, I reached out to Leonard Kleinrock, who was amazing, just an amazing individual. Again, I don't know if you saw the documentary, Lo and Behold, but he was he's the head guy at UCLA, and worked with packet switching and really invented a lot of that. And he would, he was gracious enough to accept my request for me to interview him. I worked with Jeff Rulison, who was the lead software engineer for Doug's team, Vince Cerf, co-inventor of TCP/IP, Mr. Alan Kay as well. We got to interview him. And then some people that have worked with him later in his later years, Mei-Ling Fung, and also John Markoff, who's done a lot of work with him. And Tia O'Brien wrote about him. She's a journalist from San Francisco area. She covered a lot of Silicon Valley stuff, just like John. And we're going to be able to. We got fairly blessed to be able to interview the CEO and the chairman of Logitech. So we're gonna fly out there next. So the doc is actually done with the filming, but these guys, they came in late, and if they were gracious enough to actually help us with some funding, so we can get some of the music.
That's good.
It's extremely important for anything. So
yeah,
they were very gracious with us. But in addition to that, we get to interview them, and I know both the CEO Brecken and Mr. De Luna, I forget his name, but they've known Doug for years. You know, they in fact, Doug had an office at Logitech for many years. So they were excited, and they were willing to jump on board, and we're going to go chat with them next month.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, so back to so you say we, so it's yourself, right, and your brother, and then your father.
You're right. Sorry,
Is that right? That's okay.
I jumped ahead. So yes, the production team is really it's me, brother David Silveira, and my stepfather David Quinton.
Okay.
They've been in the film industry for many years.
Okay.
And part time, we have a couple of other people working for us. Like we had a gentleman by the name of Ben Carthel work with us a little bit, and we also brought on board a producer late in the game. His name is Leo Roberts from Tantrum Productions, and he's helping us out as well. So that's our team. Small. The budget came from me originally, and now we have some help from a couple of other people. But that's the team.
And I know I was looking at the website, and I'll put links in all the show notes or anything. So it's augmentationfilm.com. And I believe, didn't I see where, I guess you have a tentative release date? Yeah, June 1st. Is that right?
Yeah, we wanted to push it for June 1st. It's going to get pushed a little longer simply because of budget constraints. But it will be released. It will definitely be released by October or November of this year, because we want to match the 50th anniversary of the Mother of All Demos.
Okay. Did you guys ever do like crowdsourcing? That's sort of Kickstarter or Indiegogo or anything like that?
We didn't.
Is that anything you're thinking of, or as far as anyone pre-buying it or that sort of thing? Or
it's kind of too late in the game for that. We're basically in the home stretch of getting things done. Even though we're going to go back and film at Logitech, we really are kind of done.
Okay.
And at this point of the game, it would take longer. And so for the next one, possibly, yes. For this one, I started too late and it didn't happen. So.
And I think on the site you mentioned, so you guys then want to submit it to different film festivals, right? You cut out there a little bit, like different film festivals, and I guess maybe you might approach like the Computer History Museum or something like that, maybe.
We filmed there as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would think they would want to show it.
Yep, and or showing. We're hoping it will be there as well. The release, right?
Yeah.
But we gotten the green light tentatively, so we're working on getting that done with SRI and also with the Computer History Museum. They're going to have festivities for the celebration, the anniversary of the demo, and we'd like to be a part of it. Mm-hmm. But we will send it to film festivals, absolutely.
Well, it's really great. I mean, I was really happy to hear about it and hear about all of your work, you and your team's work, and because Douglas Engelbart is sort of he's a very important person in the realm of computer history, and he's just not well known. So it'll be nice for him to be more well known, and I think this documentary will do a lot for that.
Absolutely.
Oh, one last question I have for you, though. So you spoke to his daughter. I'm sorry if you mentioned her name. I'm not sure if I caught it. But, right, you spoke to her daughter?
I spoken to...
Sorry.
spoken to Christina. She leads... She's the head of the Bootstrap Institute, which is their team. Right? And I also spoke to his granddaughter. They've been a little hands-off, which is fine. Mm-hmm. I think prefer it that way, and I think it's probably best too. But they've been absolutely fantastic to us. They've been very nice, and they were supportive. And I never, I reached out various times, making sure what I was doing is okay.
Yeah.
I'm not crossing any lines or upsetting anybody. And so far, everything's been good. I think they'll be proud of the work. I know that they like the trailer quite a bit, and that's exciting for me that they like it, because that's important.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, and I'll keep in touch and make updates, announcements, and follow it closely. One more last question. So you do intend to sell it, obviously, at some point. So what do you think? It'll be a DVD release, or nowadays when are you thinking about, would you make it Blu-ray, you think?
I don't know.
It's always a tough question with these things.
I'm an IT guy. I'm brand new to me. Now, my brother and my stepfather, they've been in the industry for many, many years, right? They know better.
Yeah.
My thoughts when we get to that bridge, right? Because we've been crossing them one step at a time. But when we get to that, I thought possibly Netflix, Hulu, things like that.
I say my question's kind of outmoded already too, because obviously streaming's the way to go now.
Yes,
See, I'm old and old fashioned, so that yeah. VHS tape just for old time's sake.
Possibly for you, I'll send you one. Yes.
So thanks again.
I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you.
Okay, there's Don Andrews' hand in Menlo Park, and in a second we'll see the screen that he's working and the way the tracking spot moves in conjunction with movements of that mouse. I don't know why we call it a mouse. Sometimes I apologize. It started that way, and we never did change it.